There are growing and expanding opportunities for Canada in general, Saskatchewan in particular, because Alberta, Saskatchewan, these are resource-rich provinces within Canada, and there's absolutely no doubt in my many years of interactions with the Chinese side that they have expressed strong interest in all kind of resources Canada has, and have viewed Canada in a very positive manner. I think we can see that China has coming in the past year and a half heavily into the energy sector investment, and China and Japan and other Asian countries actually have come into Saskatchewan as well in some of the potash and other mining operations, cooperations. So I think the trend is that China is really just beginning to invest heavily abroad. In the next 5, 10 to 20 years, we'll see substantial Chinese overseas merger and acquisition and investment activities, and Canada is one of the top priorities. Canada is stable. Canada has a small population but a large resource base, and the Chinese will need uranium, they will need potash, they need oil, they need all the metals that Canada has, and this is the whole on a global scale. China is basically going in terms of what they call the go-out strategy. They will seek these markets, and when the conditions are ripe, they will invest and they will seek joint ventures, equities, or takeovers even. So we see, I personally see a great potential for Saskatchewan, for Alberta, for Canada in general.
Great. Have you been part of any groups or trade missions that have actually spoken to Canadian groups?
Yes, actually, I am the annual Canada-China Energy Conference organizer. I organize since 2004 an annual Canada-China Energy and Environment Forum, which started actually as a Department of Foreign Affairs and International Trade's strategic working group towards China, that initiative. And we've been meeting every year. Now, basically, we're doing alternatively 1 year in China, 1 year in Canada. And we actually engage China by bringing government officials, major companies and academics from both sides every year together to talk about these issues. And the Chinese side have expressed repeatedly every year on a range of issues, from Canada's investment environment to the size of the energy projects, to the gateway project, to potentially working with different Canadian ventures in resolving some of the issues they consider, such as investment environment in Canada in general, jointly investment, maybe some kind of a legislation or agreement to facilitate bilateral investment. They talk about China's involvement in Canadian energy and resource sectors in terms of potentially maybe even exporting or sending laborers to work in the Canadian resource sectors. And of course, this is against the backdrop of our labor costs is rather high. They talk about the global energy and resource prices, what they may have an effect on Canada-China energy and resource relations. So these are the kind of things that we do, and I talk to them on a regular basis.
The M&A activity obviously is going to increase in the future with the tremendous growth in China. Can you just summarize what the growth in China is right now?
Well, the Chinese, with the past 30 years of explosive growth, is at a stage that is really consumes large percentages of major metals, resources, energy, coal, every major category of major resources. China is a leading consumer, if not the leading producer, and in many ways, China is setting the prices for many of these resources that Canada actually produce and export. So China is an important factor in our everyday life, whether we deal with China or not. But so far, China's going out strategy in terms of merger and acquisition activities so far has been moderate. If you look at the global scale, the Chinese overseas investment is very small. In the past 10 years, the accumulated Chinese foreign investment is around $230 billion. But if you look at the Chinese domestic savings alone, the Chinese domestic savings alone is about $8 trillion. And that's expected to grow to about close to $20 trillion by 2020. So some calculations show that if only 5% of that savings is being taken out to invest abroad for merger and acquisition activities, then China could have invested abroad on an annual basis $800 billion just for investing abroad. So that means so far we have not seen any large scale of Chinese overseas direct investment at all. It's just the beginning. So the issue now is how do we receive and how do we perceive the Chinese overseas investment strategies, and how we may take advantage in some ways of the Chinese capital, which is strong and well backed by the state-owned banks. And so they're reliable. If we're cost-strapped, if our enterprises, large or small, need joint venture, need capital input, many of our resource-based large projects do need long-term capital input before production. So I think there might be opportunities for Canadian companies to work and to receive Chinese capital. And of course, in relation to that, we may debate to what extent the Chinese investment will mean in terms of sovereignty, in terms of Canada-China relations. So I've been saying that it's not the issue for the Chinese. If you look at the scale, if their determination, they will invest abroad. They will come abroad to invest. The issue for Canada and for many other resource-rich states is really to what extent we're comfortable in receiving the Chinese investment, to what scale that we feel comfortable that the Chinese can come in to invest and we can be confident in working with them.
Well, it sounds like a win-win situation for Canada and both U.S.
I think if managed well,
yes.
If we do not treat it as a zero-sum game, we can gain, especially if you look at the Chinese current level of investment in Canada. There is not even a major pipeline to the West Coast to export oil to China, but somehow $12+ billion have been invested in Canadian oil sands, even they're all exporting to the United States at the moment. So Chinese obviously is having a more nuanced understanding of energy security. Now they're saying by investing in Canada, in Canadian energy and resource sectors, the whole market supply will go up. So where China buys these resources, energy, doesn't matter because the global supply would be increased overall as a result of the Chinese investment in Canada and other places. Chinese interest in Canadian oil sands doesn't matter whether it's Saskatchewan or in Alberta. I mean, it's clear that the Chinese have a range of mining interest in Saskatchewan in particular, but the location of oil sands, whether it being in Saskatchewan, BC, or in Alberta, I don't think it matters that much. I mean, one of the latest Chinese investments is in shale gas within Incarnate. That's in BC. So I don't think Chinese are particularly picky, but Chinese, they are looking at the provincial altitude. They are listening to what extent each premier of the Western provinces are saying about their expectations and their attitudes towards Chinese investment. I think so far all the Western provinces in general have expressed a strong welcoming attitude towards Chinese investment. I think that's important. The political context is important. At the federal level, we know between early 2006 to early 2009 that the political attitude or atmosphere is not very welcoming towards the Chinese investment. And the Chinese simply did not buy any of our assets, major assets, no. They bought a lot of Canadian company-owned assets outside of Canada, but not inside Canada. Since then, the attitude changed, relations warmed up. Prime Minister Harper visited China by the end of 2009, and since then we see major deals happening in billions of dollars. So the Chinese do pay attention to the political context.